Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, a podcast that celebrates the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And on this hump day, the last hump day of our season number 2, we are looking at the film Blazing Saddles, one ending credit minute at a time. I'm your host, I'm Alan Sanders.
I am your co-host, Walt Murray.
Walt, I cannot believe we are wrapping this movie up and that a 1974 film that had so many people and players, the fact that we can do credits, it's not even a 60-second credit sequence.
No, and on the way to the studio today, I really was just like, how is this the last recording session of this season? It just blew right by.
But I think it's that whole thing. I've made that joke before. Don't ever ask a pregnant woman right after birth, do you want another one?
Right.
Because I'm actually looking forward to having some downtime to prep for the next season. But there's also a part of me that's like, oh, we're kind of done.
I know. And it's funny, though, too, because last night I was sitting around, kids were gone, wife was gone. I was like, all right, watching a movie, and the movie that we've been talking about for next season was sitting there, and I ended up watching another Gene Wilder movie, but I was like, I can't wait to get going for next season.
We did a movie night last night, and I wanted to watch the movie that we're talking about doing for season 3. I couldn't get the wife interested in that just yet. I think part of it is the resentment of like, are you already planning season 3?
Right.
I'm not going to have a notepad out. I just want to sit back and watch it, so that way I've got one fresh viewing in my head.
Yeah, because it's a great movie.
Because I've got pieces in my head, but it's been a long time since I've seen it.
Yeah, I watched it about 6 months ago.
Okay, yours is much fresher than what I've got.
Yeah, but it had been a while, and it's as good as I remember it being.
I cannot wait. Well, I can't even talk about it. Okay, never mind. Because I was going to talk about a scene, one of my favorite scenes, and I was like, but that would give it away. So everybody's like on their edges of their seat. So let's go ahead and set the stage for today. Today might be we'll see how the timing goes on this. We don't set a timer. We don't limit ourselves, except for just feeling what it's like to have completed the minute. But we are going to start with the car continuing to drive off into the sunset. We watch the guys get off horseback and remind the audience that still a modern movie. Yeah, it was set in the Old West, but the message still applies. And we've argued all 93 minutes so far, Walt. The message still applies today.
Yes, it does.
So we're going to start with the car driving off. We'll get the big giant the end, and then we'll go through the credits. This technically last minute is only 44 seconds long. That's how short the credits are.
Wow, that's crazy. And particularly comparing it to the movie that they will release a few months after this, Young Frankenstein, where everything seemed to be kind of on a slow roll. This one they blow right through.
Yeah, it's that style of like, it's almost like a slideshow. Put up a slide, here's all the names. Put up the next slide, and more names. It doesn't even scroll.
And I know that they were thinking through doing it, they were trying to do it the way they had done it in the 30s. So I understand that they were...
Oh, with Young Frankenstein?
With Young Frankenstein. Where this one they just blow right through, probably like most of the other movies were at that point.
Well, it's also interesting to see how Hollywood and contracts and recognition has changed, because now anybody that had anything to do with the movie, whether it was you created a poster for somebody or you delivered sub sandwiches one day on the set. I mean, these credit sequences for most of your movies now will last 5, 6, 7 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And here, we're still getting the end of the movie for the first third of this minute, of which it's only 44 seconds long. So we have about 30 seconds, and that's how long it takes to do the credits.
Well, I was watching a movie I was watching the producers last week. It's amazing that the producers, like the first 5, 7, maybe even 10 minutes of that movie is a scene that keeps pausing with more and more credits. And so this is the opening scene. Mm-hmm. And so you really have like 10 minutes of credits at the front end of that movie. And it's everybody from cameramen to editors to whatever. I really like how everything is pushed to the back of the movie now.
Well, and then who actually started that, or actually it was I think he even got fined, but George Lucas. Oh. He said, I think the movie needs to start. We're not in there to spend, with music and some creative, maybe fonts and things. We want the movie to start. Mm-hmm. And I think he got fined for doing Star Wars by the Guild at that time, because it was against the rules that you needed to give all the attribution to all your lead stars and your cameraman and director. And he's like, nope, I'm just going to start Star Wars. It's just going to start.
Well, particularly with an action adventure movie, you want to get in and get everybody's attention right off the bat.
Well, if you look, the pairing of Spielberg and George Lucas, Spielberg is like, you know what? We're going to go ahead and roll the credits during the beginning. We'll show some action-y stuff at the same time, but the credits roll all throughout the opening.
I think there's some movies you can do that with. Not all movies. I think you now have to figure out what you're doing. But if you have, like a James Bond cold open, that's almost ideal because you have like 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes of action. You introduce Bond, you maybe have a villain or two, and then you break, have the credits, and then go back in and start really that story. So it's there are a lot of different ways to do it, but I think that you have to know your audience. You have to know what you're trying to accomplish, and then make it work.
Yeah.
And I like that a whole lot better than having a rigid structure of how to do that.
Well, we had a lot more opening credits for this movie than as far as how long it took. It took us 3.5 minutes to get through the opening credits. It's going to take us only one episode to get through the closing. So let's go ahead and we'll go through this first, and then we'll get our final thoughts on the movie. We do see the car speeding off with the final flare of trumpets, the ending of the theme song, and we get the big giant "The End" in the typical branding of what we saw with the Blazing Saddles titling, the reddish orange on the top, kind of cascading down into a yellowish at the bottom. And as we see that, the sun is setting just below the mountain peak, and it starts to fade out. So it almost is like we're watching the sunset literally happen on the screen with the blackout.
It's a really nice scene.
It is. It's a nice picture almost.
Yeah.
Except instead of horses trotting off, you've got the dust trail of a car, a limousine taking our 2 stars off the picture.
Yeah, and then the sun setting in the background over the mountain, and it really is a great scene. I'd almost like to have a picture of that hanging somewhere because it's a great scenic view.
So right at 10 seconds in, we get our first title card, and it truly, or credit card, not credit card like we're going to go buy something, but the credits on a
like
card.
We're going to go destroy our financial future.
Yes. to put into this movie. We get, in order, Bart is listed first, Cleavon Little. I think we've talked a lot about him throughout, but the more we've gone through the movie, the more I can't imagine anybody else creating the character of Sheriff Bart.
No, I really can't. I think he was the perfect person for this, and it's a shame that we lost him so young. And of course, he did a lot of Broadway and things like that.
Well,
so
he said his true love was the stage, that he had been in Hollywood after this movie, did some things, did some television, but when he went back to New York for a play, and then he was interviewed about it later, he said, I didn't realize that I was not home when I was in L.A., but when I came back to New York to the stage, I felt like I was home. And that's just him. He felt like he was more, his calling was for the stage.
I can understand that. That would not be my calling. I just can't memorize lines like that.
That much at once?
That would be way outside of my of my strength. But he is such a great actor in this movie. In the times when he needs to take over the scene, he takes over the scene. In the times that he needs to be a little bit more background, he does that. His chemistry with Gene Wilder and some of the other actors is just fantastic, and you feel like he's doing a good give and take. And at the same time, the scene that keeps standing out to me so much that I really love is when they're having the face off, and he says, "Stop that boy redneck." I love that spine of steel, and the way that he delivers that line is so perfect, and you just want to stand up and cheer when he does it. And
when he needs to be authoritative, he has no problem. When he's negotiating with the citizens of Rockridge about the railroad workers, I've got a plan. I told you, give me 24 hours, I'll figure this out. Here's the plan. And they're like, well, no deal. Or they're like, well, we won't take the Irish. He's like, well, then no deal.
Right.
I'm here to save everybody, not just a portion of the population. I want to save everybody.
Right.
And that's what I love. The whole message is always about, I'm here to save everybody. And he does along the way. We've mentioned this multiple times. He converts a lot of people. And I love Sheriff Bart, and Cleavon Little will always be Sheriff Bart to me.
I think he not only converts the people of Rock Ridge, but I think he also converts the audience. And I think that the audience comes on board with him really, really fast. And I am one of those people that can be a little bit guilty of thinking that the person on the screen is like that in real life. I kind of have to, because I really get into a movie when I'm watching. And with Cleavon Little at the end, I really feel like, man, I want to go hang out with that guy. He seems like a really awesome guy to be around. So Cleavon really just does a great job of capturing us that way.
A second credit, which is kind of interesting, but I suppose as far as his body of work, he was still probably one of the biggest named actors in the movie. Gene Wilder as the Waco Kid gets the second billing.
I've heard of him.
You heard of him? we should do a show about him.
We really should give him a little bit more time. But it is funny, too. You know, we've talked about this 31 minutes until...
It's about 33 minutes when he comes into the movie, basically a third of the way into the film before he shows up.
But then how often do we think of this movie as being a Gene Wilder movie?
Oh, it's easily one of his top 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, when everybody thinks about what are the top 3 or 4 movies of Gene Wilder, this one is always in the top 3.
Always. And he could have been a blend into the background kind of character, but, you know, it's Gene Wilder.
Well, the fact that he's so subdued compared to other performances that we know him for, and yet still stands out. And I think part of that is the relationship that's instantly formed between Sheriff Bart and the Waco Kid.
Yeah, and the chemistry that the two characters have is really great. And I like the way that Jim kind of shepherds Bart a little bit, even though he's kind of a mess himself. But he's able to say, hey, you know, what do you expect from these people? These people, you know, essentially saying, these people are a bunch of racists. You know, they're a bunch of ignorant people. And saying, hey, you know, you're going to have to give them time. You're going to have to work with them. You can't expect them overnight just to throw the switch and go, okay, now we're fine with them.
Well, earlier this week, we had author J.W. Webb, Jim Webb, who said, you know, the yin and the yang, they complement each other. It's not just because they're black and white. It's because some of maybe the areas, maybe that over-optimistic view of Bart that kind of gets the better of him. Gene Wilder's got the more gritty, realistic, even maybe more of a pessimistic view of the world from his perspective. Jim brings that pessimism down, and maybe Bart gets Jim to feel a little bit better about the world, so maybe that pessimism drops a little, and maybe he becomes a little bit more optimistic. But at the same time, Jim brings more of a, hey, Bart, you better look at the world realistically, not just with such optimism that you forget that these are common people. You know, you got to be careful how you maneuver when you're doing what you're doing.
Well, I need to remind myself here that this is just a movie, but when you look at these two guys, Jim is really in kind of a self-imposed prison because he has chosen a life of being a gunfighter, and because of being a gunfighter, because of things that came out of that, it drove him to alcoholism. And he's kind of gone down this path that has led to a very pessimistic worldview. He's hopeless. He is a drunk, and he's hanging upside down in a jail cell after a hard night of living it up.
Oh, and we talked about the symbolism of shooting that upside down because his whole world is upside down.
It absolutely is. And then you've got Bart, who basically doesn't let anything get him down. Being treated badly, being, you know, treated worse than a handcart, being treated like a slave even though he's been freed. And you just know that through his whole life, he has just had one bad thing after another happen to him at the hands of other people. And yet he's the one who comes along to Jim and lifts him up out of his despair and helps get him on the right path. So it's a really great dynamic that those two have, and really creatively written, and the acting, of course, between the two of them is just amazing.
Last thing I'll say on this is I think Bart, what I love most about him, if we could encapsulate, like, what does he embody? He never plays the victim. No matter what the circumstances, he's never going to go into that victim mentality. Life can deal you a bad hand. Nobody gets the perfect start. There's always going to be various places where we all start and stop in life, but he never falls back on victimhood. He's always like, I'll take charge of my life. I'll make my destiny happen for me.
He's always looking for a good chance to do something. You know?
And I love that.
And he's not asking for anybody to do anything for him, but he does a ton of stuff for other people.
The next guy, and it's a guy that, again, we talked about this. I don't see how, if you ever recast it, how you get anyone to play Taggart. But Slim Pickens is the third on this title card, or this credit card. You can't beat Taggart's performance. He goes from being in charge when he knows he's the only one on the scene to lapdog when Hedley Lamar's on the scene. He's got great comic timing. He's got a great voice. It's the most. There is nobody better than Taggart for playing Taggart than Slim Pickens.
Well, and I have to agree with you. And the first three people on here, and we're about to have two more, you could not cast those parts better with anybody who was in Hollywood then or is in Hollywood now. I just can't see anybody else playing that part like Slim Pickens does.
Next one up, Hedley Lamar, Harvey Korman. You know, he was always better on TV. We talked with Chris that he always felt better in the whole sketch comedy TV, that being in front of a camera and a big movie audience was a little bit harder. But what an amazing role he created with Hedley Lamar, to walk that fine line of being the villain without being so villainous it shuts us off of the comedy, and yet we're glad that he gets caught and basically gets shot by Bart in the end.
One of the things that I keep thinking about with him is something that we talked about a little bit with Chris, his son, that the way that he portrays this character, you don't want to know his backstory because you don't want to be sympathetic. But he really makes you hate him. So, like, he is the perfect bad guy, and he plays it so perfectly that you just know he's bad. You don't really care why. You don't want to know what got him there, and then you're happy to see his destruction.
Yeah, I think he nails it. Madeline Kahn, maybe one of our all-time favorite actresses.
Yes, no doubt.
Just such a talent. Another actress taken way too soon from cancer, playing the Lily von Stupp. The fact that we've had now 2 movies for our 2 seasons back-to-back and see 2 completely different characters from Madeline Kahn, it's fantastic. And her Lily von Stupp is probably the first thing I've ever seen Madeline Kahn play. I can't remember anything earlier than that. I saw later Madeline Kahn's in other movies, but I always came back to she's Lily von Stupp.
And she, again, I mean, we're kind of repeating ourselves, but nobody else could have done this. I don't think, just from a talent standpoint or personality standpoint, there's anybody who could have played that part like she did. And she really captivates you when she's on screen.
And we should give her a nod. She got a Best Supporting Actress nomination for this role.
Yeah, and well-deserved.
And she comes on even later than Gene Wilder does.
Yeah, she does.
And
her
she only has a couple of scenes that are really big. She has a
Yeah.
couple of places where you see her. But besides the singing scene and then the sheriff scene after and then being interrogated by Harvey Korman, she doesn't have a lot.
But what she does have, she really capitalizes on.
Nails it. We got to give a shout out to the guy who directed it, Mr. Mel Brooks himself. Loves being in his own movies as well. He does the whole Alfred Hitchcock thing, has to be in his own movies. The one exception, of course, we saw was our first season. We did Young Frankenstein. Even then, he still got his voice in there.
Yeah, he did.
But Governor Lepetamain also played the Indian chief. And lots of voiceover work, too.
Yeah, and this is going to be our last visit with Mel because, these are the two.
At least for a while, until the producers comes up.
That's right.
Which may or may not be next season. Probably not.
Probably not.
So for those folks who are like, I hope you're going to...
Though it is a great movie. And,
yeah.
I watched it the other night.
It's amazing that Gene and Mel only did 3 movies together.
It really is. And his thumbprint on these 2 movies particularly is so strong, but I still think that when you look at what he did here, and I'll throw the producers in with it too, and then you look at what he did later, the creative development of his career is very interesting. I think these are stronger, deeper movies than what we see later on when we get to Spaceballs and things like that, even though I love Spaceballs. But he really is a much more disciplined writer, I think, at this point, as far as the storyline goes. Because, Spaceballs and that sort of stuff is just parody. But it seems to me that in those earlier movies, he is a lot more, a lot deeper, and the messages are a lot stronger.
I'm going to take it maybe even a little bit of similar to what you're saying, but a little side jaunt. I think early in his career, and you got to remember, he was about 40 or so when he did this. So It wasn't like he was a young chicken, but he surrounded himself with people he trusted. And I think he was still kind of, remember this, he hadn't had the hit yet. This was the movie that from here on out, he became Mr. Brooks, It was like, oh, Mr. whatever you say. I think he was still in that era of people could get through and he would be open to change. And we saw how many changes we had from the script to what made it in the movie. And I think that sort of collaboration and trusting the other people around you, not to say that he didn't trust people later, but I sometimes wonder when you become such a big name, everybody just becomes yes, and they agree with you on everything. We saw that with George Lucas with the prequels. Why didn't somebody say, George, this is stupid? Because he's George Lucas.
Right.
To an extent, Steven Spielberg hasn't really had the breakout hit. His last, quote, blockbuster, I guess Ready Player One counts, but was Crystal Skull. And that's the movie everyone continuously rips. Why did you do that to Indiana Jones? It's almost like, but it's Steven Spielberg. He's the guy that did Jaws and Close Encounters, and he did, E.T., and we can't tell him no. We can't tell him this is a dumb idea.
Well, he's had his hand in a lot of different things, some of the World War II epics and things like that.
Well, I'm not saying that some of his later stuff isn't good. I just think directors get to that point where they're almost mythic on the set.
Right.
And I worry that sometimes when you're mythic, people are afraid to tell you things that they may feel like you'll be upset about. Where a younger director, a hungry director, someone who's just getting their career tends to be, well, first of all, a lot of times they may have no choice. The fact that Mel Brooks had the contract that allowed him to have final say was pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing.
But he was open to, it was a collaborative writing process. He had a couple of different editors where I know he loves to be in the edit room too, but he had 2 people that were editing. They made some changes on the set. He was very open to making changes, and I think people were probably coming to him saying, Mel, can we try it this way? Can we try it this way?
Sure.
Later, it's a lot harder when you're dealing with a legend. Can you imagine telling Clint Eastwood, hey, Clint, I have a better idea. It's Clint Eastwood.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things with Spielberg is when he moves later into his career and he is working on some of those World War II epics, you are constrained by history. You know, you have to have guys wearing certain uniforms. You have to use certain weapons. You have to be in certain locations. So he almost has moved from a place where he's freer to change the script, to change a location, things like that in, you know, Indiana Jones or whatever, to now when he's working on the other stuff, well, you have to set it in 1944. You know, you have to wear this kind of equipment and be in this kind of location. Where with Mel, he moved into more parody stuff, and you could do anything. You could put a Nazi in, you know, 1437 and throw him in with a bunch of, you know, you can do anything you want to. So,
well, it's interesting you said that. We mentioned that a little earlier in the season. This is a true satire. It's there to tell you a specific message, but to do it in a way that takes you off guard.
Yes.
Airplane and the movies that follow like that, and like Spaceballs and Men in Tights, are parodies. There's an existing movie or an existing kind of maybe 2 or 3 movies you're making fun of, you're mocking. And those are going to be funny, but you're not going to get the kind of depth out of a parody as you would out of a satire.
Right. I agree.
All right, we remember the story. Burton Gilliam told that to make it up to him, not that it really did financially, Lyle gets the next billing directly under Mel Brooks, or Burton Gilliam's Lyle gets that next nod. But Burton still had a little bit of a sore spot, as we'll hear at the end of the week here. I know we put it in during one of the episodes this season, but we're going to bring you the entire 2-hour interview Friday.
Yeah, and you know that does kind of stand out in my mind, but also that was maybe a 2-minute thing out of a 2-hour interview.
Correct.
And most of what he had to say was great.
And it's just how contracts were done then versus now.
Absolutely.
And we know Mel was still a younger director, and that I fully believe it was a mistake, but it was a costly mistake in terms of eventual dollars for an actor down the road.
And recognition. Yeah.
The recognition.
And I think, too, that, if you said, Burton, list your favorite movies you've ever worked on, this is probably right at the top of the list.
He still dresses in the character and does signings.
Does
so obviously,
yes.
Right. It's the movie that put him on the map. Mongo gets the next one. Alex Karras, the ex-Detroit Lion. I get where he was a little upset. We heard from Burton that the final edit wasn't nearly what he was hoping it would be for the character of Mongo. I think we all still agree Mongo is a great character.
No question. And I would imagine that what Alex Karras was expecting was more of the television version to be the cinematic version. And honestly, I mean, we said this when we were watching those scenes. I would have been great with having those as part of the cinematic. Those were. I'm really kind of sad that those got left out.
Of all the things that we did talk about it earlier in the season, the 3 defeats of Mongo, and really when we read about a 4th version with the 2 cannons pointed into each other. I mean, it was funny to go through the script, but it was so good. And then the fact that we saw the TV version, I'll always wonder if we ever get Mel Brooks on. My question is going to be why? Why did you feel that because it made so much sense to show Bart that he constantly beat Mongo, not just once with a box of chocolates. He beat him again and again and again, and always in a different way.
And they're very funny.
They're all very funny.
And it
would have only added, I think we added it up, like no more than 2 minutes to the runtime of the movie.
And so you've got, 2 very, very funny scenes that help continue to make the point about how he beat Mongo that fit with the flow of the movie, and they're not in it. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Let's go to Olsen Johnson, who I think we never established who's really in charge in this town, but I always got the sense that it was Olsen Johnson or Howard Johnson.
Yeah.
The 2 of them seem to be the maybe is one the commissioner and one's the mayor or whatever, or are they both heads? Are they co-heads? Are they the 2 elders? I don't know, but Olsen Johnson, David Huddleston, great job. And I mentioned this throughout, nailed every one of his lines as written, made every one of those lines work as written.
That's absolutely amazing.
Such a good actor.
He is. And I still, one of my favorite lines of the whole movie is the one about, but not the Irish.
Not the Irish. We'll do that when we go through the, maybe we'll do that at the end of each title card so we have all the names on the screen. We'll do that. What are some of our favorite lines? So I'll save that for a second. Let's get to the last name on this particular card. We've got Reverend Johnson, our good friend Liam Dunn.
Man, he's just great. He is just great. And unfortunately, we're seeing him before he kind of goes downhill a little bit. But he's just fantastic. And I never put together that he plays this part and the part of Mr. Hilltop in Young Frankenstein, and gets kicked in the nards or kneed in the nards by Gene Wilder. But he was great. He played a old. I kind of take it he's been a little beat up and grizzled and worn out, kind of reverend, and perfect for this town. I mean, he plays the perfect reverend for this town.
And remember what we said Monday with Jim Webb earlier, that his arc, you could see maybe he knew he was a man of the cloth, so sometimes he did what he thought was expected of him, but he really wasn't the true man of the cloth. And here at the very end, he's upset that Bart's leaving. He starts to cry.
Yeah.
God bless you. He really has changed as that. And we see that. Liam Dunn did such a good job playing that role and showing the arc.
He did. He was definitely phoning it in early on. He was, I think the way that they would address him now is he would have Pastor Burnout early in the movie. But Bart tends to restore hope with everybody that he comes in contact with. And Reverend Johnson really benefits from that.
All right. So with the names that we've gone through, these are all like some of the top names. We're going to have some more. Bart, if you had to pick one or two of your favorite lines from Sheriff Bart, what would they be? Like when they just pop in your head?
Like I said earlier, the one about watch that boy redneck, that is probably my favorite one. Several of the scenes between he and Jim are so great. But then also the one where he pulls the gun on himself, I think is my favorite line of his. It's my favorite scene that he's in. And just the way that the crowd reacts to him, and they're like, oh, he'll do it. No, don't say that. That's a sure way of getting him killed. And then when he goes in and he's like,
oh, baby. You are so talented.
And they are so dumb. I think that's amazing. He just plays that so well.
I think my two favorite things are the opening when he decides to do the Cole Porter song and sing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, that immediately, I was like, okay, this guy, he knows. Because remember, he stopped two of those other railroad workers from starting a fight, and that would have gone completely in a different direction. He knew there's a better way. And so that whole chess player mentality of how to outdo, I've always loved that. I love the pulling the gun on himself. That is just fantastic. And his whole, them Schnitzengrubens will wipe you out. The whole 15's my limit on Schnitzengruben. I mean, those are lines I quote all the time. Just so those stand out to me. What about the Waco Kid?
Oh man, Gene from the minute he comes on screen is just fantastic. And what was the line that we've had of his 3 times through the movie where he's like, when he says, "You're not the Waco Kid," and he's like, "Oh," it's kind of that.
Oh, dearie,
oh,
dear.
dear.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Dearie, dear.
And his hair, his hair is kind of like a line of its own. But I think that scene of his with Bart where he says, these are people of the land, the common clay of the New West, morons. I think that is my favorite line of his.
I really love the whole line when he is first introduced and he's like, "Are you awake?" He goes, "Are we awake?" And he's like, "We're not sure. Are we black?" "Yes, we are." He goes, "Then we're awake, but we're very puzzled." It's such like that line. Like nobody uses that word. Like you don't say to yourself, "No. I'm feeling very puzzled right now." Right. Winnie the Pooh says, "I puzzled and puzzled." But Gene Wilder does it in a way that you're like, well, of course he's puzzled.
Yeah, of course.
And it works. And the whole dearie dear, I've always liked the line, "Look at that." He's like, solid as rock. Yeah, but this is the hand I shoot with.
That's so goofy.
It's perfect.
And of course it's the opposite of of his gun hand.
Right. And he purposely is not using his gun hand.
Yes.
And then the whole, no, don't do that. Don't shoot him. You'll just make him mad.
Right. It's not really a who, it's more of a what.
He's not so much of a who, he's more of a what.
Well, and then of course the
great lines.
What's your pleasure? Chess, screw.
Let's
Play chess.
Talk about building a dynamic between those two right off the bat.
Great.
Do we need to even discuss what is Taggart's best line in this entire movie?
What in the wide world of sports
is
could
going on
be
here?
any other favorite line of Slim Pickens?
That we use to this day. We use it as sound bites on the radio shows.
And I think even people who've never seen this movie would go, wait a minute, that's from a movie.
I recognize that.
I know this one. And but he had a couple other great lines too. And like when the horse gets hung and he jumps into Harvey Korman's arms.
I don't know that he has a line. He just
No, but it's just that whole scene of
I do laugh every time he goes, well, that was lucky. Darn near lost a $400 hand car. I will never forget the irony of, because as a person watching the movie, you're thinking the most valuable thing is human life. And he's like, oh, darn, that was lucky. Like, whew, that would have been a lot of paperwork, and I'd have to explain myself.
Right.
And whew,
that's $400.
We dodged that bullet. What the hell? You're like, there's two people in quicksand.
Who you could pull out right now.
That's great. And then, of course, somebody's got to go back and get a load of dimes.
I know. That's the other great line of his. I mean, that is such... And every time that scene's coming up, I'm like, I can't wait. So,
the anger and frustration in his voice is like, Lepetamine Thruway.
what's that asshole going to think of next?
And then, like, the next time we see him, he's like, come on. Well, we ain't never going to get to Rock Ridge.
That's right. One guy at a time is going through.
It never occurs to anybody to just walk around.
Right.
It's like there's no wall.
1 second.
All right. This is going to be tough. Harvey Korman, Hedley Lamar, favorite lines or favorite moments?
Every single line. I'm really having a hard time narrowing this one down, but I love the there, Taggart. It's just a man and his horse being hung. I mean, that's a great one. He has so many great lines and so well delivered, but I think the one that epitomizes him as this character is I just remembered, I am armed. I think that line really shows us exactly who he is, that he's a snake, he's a liar, he's dishonest, and he's all about self-preservation, and he's all about Hedley Lamar.
Mm-hmm. I think the times he's talking about, be still, my mind is a whirling, he did all that, just this.
Yeah.
I wish I had the lines memorized in my head, but just this, I love all of those lines. And he says it later in the tent. He's like, I'm coming up with a bunch of creative alternatives, and a ditto.
Right, ditto. Ditto is a great line.
It's all the those highfalutin. Then, is there anything better than him dictating to Taggart his list of criminals that he wants? Take this down.
Oh,
I want
that probably has to be his best line.
And we found out from his son Chris that he actually had memorized it. It looked like he was looking off screen, but maybe he was just in his head. He was so into like visualizing what he was going after that it never he never slowed down. He never stopped. And remember, Chris said if somebody did stop him, they'd have to do the whole take. Like he couldn't start in the middle of that list. He had to start like he had built a rhythm in delivering those lines.
Well, it was definitely your classic one camera scene where they just focused on him the whole time. It was action all the way through, cut. And so it was probably, we didn't time it out, but that scene was probably a 2 or 3 minute shot. And so he really couldn't just stop and start again.
Right. So that's that. And of course, his whole go do that voodoo that you do so well.
Yeah.
Great. You've got Henry V gives his whole St. Crispin's Day speech and you feel like I could go into battle. Yeah. That's like sort of the comedy version of that speech. Like at the end, they're all like, whoa, let's go do it.
And then his under the breath things, I state your name, schmucks.
And then when he's trying to help the governor put in, just imagine your secretary. Oh, that's good advice. Thank you. Nice and improvised line.
Right as always, sir. Like every single line of his is quotable and hilarious.
All right. What about Lily von Stuck?
Man, you can't say enough about Madeline Kahn. I mean, she's just awesome. But I think that my favorite scene of hers, even though the stage scene is great and it really showcases her a lot, it's still that interaction with Bart. And when when they're back in her room, and she walks into the table when the lights out.
Damn it!
And
her real self comes out for a minute.
Yeah, and she goes behind the curtain and comes out in something at least as uncomfortable as what she was wearing. And she just is such a natural actress that you don't feel like she's working when she's doing this.
My favorite lines, and I still quote them. I love her welcoming. When someone knocks on the door, I'll go, "Welcome in, bienvenue, come."
Yeah.
I got to do it this right way. I gotta do it. Yeah, it's welcome in, bienvenue, welcome, come on in.
Yes.
Love that. I'll do that a lot. And then would you excuse me while I slip into something a little bit more comfortable? Just the way she does the over the top German accent.
Yes.
With saying that, those are some of my favorite lines. And
I also love her working the crowd.
The whole song and dance.
Are you in
number.
show business? No, then get your feet off my stage.
Remember when I was a kid, that was my least favorite part of the movie, because as a kid I didn't get what was really happening. I was like, oh, let's get back to Sheriff Bart and the Waco Kid.
Right.
Let's
This
get back to
isn't a
the funny
musical,
lines.
yeah.
Now it's like, how do you skip past that? That's like one of the best parts
So
of the movie.
good.
Mel Brooks.
He's great. His two Governor Lepetame, this movie would not be what it is without.
How many times have you said I didn't get a harumph out of that guy?
Oh, all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
I know it's a bad line, but when he's playing the Indian and he lets them go and he's like, woof, they darker than us.
That is amazing.
Schwarzes.
Well, and it's funny because it kind of shows that that old, the ugly American thing where everybody who doesn't look like you is strange and unusual is kind of the concept. And that really shows that so much that, here are the American Indians and they're letting these guys go and they're like, wow, and so it's an interesting view into where he's going with this movie. But the fact that he could go and play an American Indian, not convincingly. I mean, he couldn't go play.
Had me convinced when I was a kid, though.
Well, that's true.
I didn't even know it was the same guy when I was a kid.
That's true. And then, he is a good actor. He's a solid actor. And if you watch, what is the movie that he did after this? High Anxiety.
High Anxiety. Well, that he did as an actor.
He did as an actor, right. And he really plays that part well.
I told you, that's my favorite Harvey Korman, even though I love him in this, because of what's going on with the Alfred Hitchcock kind of spoof going on.
Especially at the end when they go up in the tower and everything.
It's fantastic. What about, I was just about Mel Brooks, one more thing. It's the TV outtakes, but his whole 2.5 minutes with the press tour in the fake Rock Ridge, everything he does is brilliant. From pretending to be Toulouse-Lautrec with the crotch, legs, crotch. That is just funny as all get out. And when he talks about, can I have you fired? Like, no, Local 32, damn unions. And all the press is right. Like, no, don't put that in a paper.
And it is so typical of just all of our politicians.
It hasn't changed.
Hasn't changed a bit.
Lyle, favorite lines or moments?
Man, I think my favorite Lyle is when he's sitting there and Taggart goes, "Send a note to headquarters.
Send wire, main office.
Send wire, main office.
Till then, I said, ow.
Send wire, main office. Tell them I said, ow. Got it."
I remember Bart's looking at him like, "You're an idiot."
Yeah, that is such a great line.
One of the lines I quote all the time, though, is I think it's his very first line when he says, "Y'all walking around like you think it's 120 degrees. Can't be more than 114.
That's a great line.
That's a great line. And later on, he's like, "Don't pay attention to that Alky. He can't even hold a gun, let alone shoot one." Like, oh, you are so in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
You are so in trouble.
Well, and it is funny, as much as I remember Lyle standing out in this movie, he doesn't have a ton of screen time either, maybe 8 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, he's only got three big scenes in the whole movie.
Yeah, and of course you see him some when they're attacking Rock Ridge.
He's the first guy to fart.
He is, and the fart scene maybe
to break wind.
Yeah.
What about Mongo? Is there? I think he's got a couple of fun lines, but is there real? I think there's the one iconic line.
Yeah, no, I think that's his.
That's the one everybody quotes.
That's his powerhouse.
pawn in game of life.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame that we didn't get more Mongo, but Mongo like candy. That's another good one. And Alex Karras really just plays this part so well.
Yeah,
and I know that he was disappointed with it, but it's a standout role. It's probably the role I remember him the most for. Mm-hmm. And,
Olson Johnson, David Huddleston. I wanted to break in earlier with it. And I said, well, let's wait till we finish all the names. My favorite, I think, of all the lines. He's got some really good lines, but when Gabby Johnson gets done with his little speech, he's like, well, who can argue with that? It's said with such legitimacy.
I know.
It's like, well, who can argue with that?
Yeah,
I'm glad these children were here today.
That is
to
what I
hear
love.
that authentic frontier gibberish.
So we were in a meeting in my office one day, and somebody kind of got off on a little tangent, and I said, I'm just glad that these other employees were here to witness this and to hear this authentic frontier gibberish. And everybody's looking at me like, you are a podcaster and an idiot.
What are you talking about?
Well, half the room knew exactly what I was talking about. But that is just so awesome.
Yeah.
And it's so indicative, too, again, of kind of politicians. And I've had to go to a couple of like local town hall meeting type things. And it is funny when somebody will stand up and just say something that makes no sense at all. And whoever's moderating it is trying to be tactful. And they're like, hey, I'm just glad that we got to hear from you. And you're like, I don't even know what he said. Was that even English?
Right.
So that was perfect.
It was a bunch of words vainly searching for a thought.
Yes, absolutely.
And Reverend Johnson, he's got several good one-liners. I'll go first on this one. We called it out earlier when we had Father Mowry. It always cracks me up, probably because I was raised Catholic. But when he says, and we will now read from the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then the dynamite comes in, duck. That's always funny. The son, you're on your own. I've always thought that was funny when the Bible gets shot out and he's like, yeah, you know what? I can only go so far as a man of the cloth.
Right.
And those are just great lines. And then when the town beats him up, when Gene Wilder's lining up his shot, he's like, oh, Lord, please grant him a steady eye. And he's like, boom, boom. He's like beating the heck out of him. Like, we're so sick of you preaching at the wrong moment.
All right, we're done.
Grant this man a keen eye. And boom, boom.
Well, I think my favorite line of his is when he's standing up in front of the townspeople and he raises the Bible and he said, heed the words of this good book, and they shoot the Bible out of his hand.
Right.
And I'm like, I think that every single person I know in the ministry can relate to this. They may not have had the Bible shot out of their hand, but they've made that speech up in front of everybody where you're like, listen to the words of this good book. And people are like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, well, come on, hurry up. The buffet is going to be closing in about a half an hour.
Well, you got to beat the Baptists.
All right, well, let's move on to the next title card here, where we get some more ending credits. And we start off with who I think is the other guy that shares the sort of senior leadership duties. Howard Johnson, the one ice cream orange roofed outhouse owner, played by John Hillerman.
Yeah,
I think he's always been Higgins to me. Like, I can't get Higgins out of my mind from the first, the original Magnum PI. But this is the only other thing I imagine him in because he's so good playing that character.
Yeah, and the favorite line of his is not even his line, but it's when they say, to the orange roof on
Howard Johnson's
outhouse. But I do like that scene when they're in the bar and he's like, and we could cure anthrax in this generation. Oh, blow it out your ass. He goes,
that was in the town hall.
Here comes Mongo.
Right. The first one, when he was saying blow it out your ass, was about, well, Nietzsche says out of chaos comes order. Right. It's like, oh, blow it out your ass, Howard. Stop with your look what I read. Look how educated I am. Whatever. Van Johnson, the useless Van Johnson,
totally
George
useless.
Firth. Still funny.
I love when he comes in and either talks to the window or talks to the desk. I mean, that's great.
One of the best visual gags, though, is where just a second before he had his gun belt on, no problem, but then when he's about to explain that all these guys that are in the fake Rock Ridge are going to figure it out, all of a sudden, magically, his gun belt is like 4 sizes too big. He puts his hands up and it falls, and he's got to pick it back up.
That's great.
Great visual gag. Gabby Johnson, played by Claude Ennis Starrett Jr.
Yeah, my favorite line by far is his speech in the town hall meeting.
But let's face it, the one line we always quote, no matter what. No, I said the sheriff is
near.
And then, boom, he said the sheriff is near. No, God, blang it, dang it. He's so angry. He gets so upset that they can't hear him. That's great.
And it's just perfect timing.
Harriet Johnson, played by Carol Arthur, Dom DeLuise's wife.
Yep.
I think probably for me, one of the funniest moments is when she that really mousy voice. I'm sorry, I'm not used to public speaking. And then, we, the white, God-fearing citizens of Rock Ridge. And everybody's like trying to like, they've all like, okay, I'm just going to play off the fact that I jumped like 13 feet.
Right. I think my favorite line of hers has to be somebody help that poor man. Stop it, Harriet. That's a sure way to get him killed.
No, that's actually the next guy too saying that. So let's go ahead and go to Dr. Samuel Johnson. I think the two of them must be together because he does call her by her first name. He says, hush, Harriet.
Too.
That's a sure way to get him killed.
That's what I was thinking.
So, and I said this before, if you needed a stand-in for Grandpa Joe's twin brother.
Oh my gosh.
Every time I look at him, I have to remind myself it's not Grandpa Joe.
It looks just like him.
So Charlie, they went really far with stretching his actual name, Charles McGregor.
No, how'd they come up with that?
That I like Bart. What I love is you see Bart with the friendship that he obviously formed with him and Charlie on the railroad, and how that sort of parallels him and Jim later.
Yes,
so they have such a great chemistry, and these two guys, whenever Charlie and Bart would have a conversation, you got the sense like there was a real history there. It didn't feel like just lines.
Yeah, and I think the thing that stands out to me about Charlie is actually Charles McGregor and what he had done in his earlier life, and ended up landing in prison, and how he was able to come out and fix his life and leave that chapter of his life behind, and really do something good and productive with his life, and from all accounts just became the kind of person that you would want to influence you and your family, and so that stands out to me, I think, more than anything else.
Next credit, Miss Stein, played by Robin Hilton.
I know what stands out about Miss Stein.
Okay, now as far as lines go.
She had lines?
She did have lines.
Yeah,
I do like the one line which is written funny. It's not delivered well, but because it's written funny. We got this urgent telegram last Friday. Like,
right.
Well, why didn't you read it last Friday? Who knows what day it even is? But
I would imagine she doesn't know what day it is.
And then when the governor is prancing around singing, and and he's pretending like he's going to be the president, and he's in the middle of giving his 70 Bill. Completely derails him, and he's like, okay, I got to get back to the affairs of state.
So, I mentioned earlier that sometimes I kind of get in my head that the actor is actually like that in real life. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say she is actually like that in real life. I think she's kind of a little bit of a...
there wasn't a whole lot there. She did a lot of other things, and she's probably glad that one adult film studio burned down.
Yes, and burned all the tapes and magazines and everything.
She had a lot of stuff that she had done that probably now, looking back, not as proud of that kind of stuff.
Probably not.
When you're young and you're hot and you're getting money to be paid to do things, you may not think.
And your acting career in other ways is not taken off.
Right. And you're thinking, I don't fault anybody for making whatever career choices they make.
Yeah, whatever.
We'll move quickly now. We do have a guy that did stand out for chewing gum online, Dan McGowan.
Our first and one of two deaths on screen.
Yeah, although you did point out we don't technically see him die, we just assume he does.
Yeah, we assume he dies. Yeah, and he does a great part, of chewing gum online. I didn't know there'd be this many people here.
There'd be so many. Buddy Bizarre.
Man, you can't say enough about Dom DeLuise. I love Dom DeLuise.
He's only on for 2 total minutes.
That's crazy.
And it's not even 2 total minutes of him talking, but he's in 2 minutes of the movie.
And he is so, I'm sure that there's something out there that I have not seen of him that I would not like him. That there's something that I didn't think but everything he's ever been in, I just love him. You want the guy as your neighbor or your uncle. He just seems so awesome. And the way he plays Buddy Bizarre is so fantastic.
I just see him, and I said it before, I do see him more in the supporting role or being in an ensemble cast when he tries to be the lead. Like the movie Fatso comes to mind. You're just like, I want it to be better. I want it to be good. I want to root for you. It's like, you can't hold a movie by yourself, but put him in a supporting or an ensemble role where he can just improvise and play, and he's brilliant.
When in Cannonball Run, That may be his second best role. This would be his first. He is that way. He's just, every time he's on screen, you're watching him because you know something's coming. He plays off of the other actors so well, and he just knows how to deliver comedy.
I think he's just one of those guys that in smaller doses, he just can just nail it. He's just trying to hold it the whole time. And obviously, as Buddy Bazaar, the director, this dressing like the 30s, putting on a 40s movie with people dressed like the 50s and 60s around him. It's like that whole 2 minutes we kept talking about how it captures that entire jump in time that we've gone all the way forward and caught up. But, his whole wrong and then nut in the face. And
well, and one thing about him, he's a big guy. He doesn't come across as, you wouldn't think of him as a dancer.
Well, he wasn't as big in this movie as he got later.
No, he definitely wasn't. But he didn't look like a dancer, He wasn't svelte and,
No, but he was going to show all these dancers how to do it.
And he does a good job. I mean, like, he actually does a decent dance,
you know? Since we covered those minutes several weeks back, my wife was like, will you stop singing that damn song in the house?
I keep
because I'm going up the
myself
stairs and I'm like the guys that are on the staircases. I'm like, throw out your hands, stick out your tush, hands on your hips, give them a push. And she's like, stop it! You'll be surprised you're doing the French mistake. Ha ha!
Well, I was riding down the road one day and I had just finished up a conference call where I had spent the whole time listening, and I was like, what song do I have in my head? And it was that song, like, just because it's such a catchy tune.
It is. It's such an what was Jim O'Kane's term? The earworm. It gets in there and it just won't get out.
Yep.
It just digs in. And the last one on this title card, which not really a whole lot that he has to say, but Count Basie gets the credit on this second screen with playing himself, which we found out when we did the background. He pretty much, in all the movies he was in,
everything he
played himself.
Yep. And he gives a good high five, or a good,
give me a five.
Give me five.
Yeah. So then the third card, this is where we get into our technical people. So that's it.
Right.
All of those extras, all of those actors, all the people with one-liners.
Totally uncredited.
Not in the movie credits at all. You have to go to IMDb to look at those. So let's go quickly through this as we're starting to rapidly run out of episode 93 time.
Crazy.
We have our film editors who I think, along with Mel Brooks, did a great job either rearranging scenes, as we've mentioned throughout the season, or clipping. You have John C. Howard and Danford Green did a great job keeping this movie nonstop. It really, once it gets going, it doesn't stop till the end.
Yeah, there's no drag in this.
The title design, the font work, remember this is back where you didn't have computers doing stuff. Created the font work, Anthony Goldschmidt. Sound was Gene Cantamisa, and I think he just dove into the Warner Brothers cartoon library for a lot of his sounds.
He did.
But he still had to come up with all the other stuff. And if you go back and listen with headphones to the fight, there's a constant noise and rioting, and so he's layering all these different things and still trying to keep track of what's happening on screen. There's a lot of stuff going on
Pretty
in
impressive.
The last 5 or 10 minutes of the movie with all those.
And none of it done with computers.
No, none of it. It's all tape.
Yeah.
This is all before you could digitally just add new things. Your re-recording artist, you had Arthur Piantendosi and Richard Tyler, as well as Les Franschholz. Set decorator was Maury Hoffman, and property master, Sam Gordon.
And that's all I have to say about that?
That's about all I got to say about that. And we get a fourth title card. We get Nisa Hyams, responsible for casting.
Yeah, kudos to her, man. She did great.
Although, from what we heard, Mel Brooks was also heavily involved in casting.
No doubt.
And we got to remind everybody that Richard Pryor was also fundamental in picking Cleavon Little.
Yes.
So even though there's a casting director, let's face it, Mel Brooks and some of the people he trusted had a big say-so as well.
Oh,
Mel Brooks is the one that said to Madeline Kahn, I got to see your legs.
Oh, right.
If you're playing a Marlena Dietrich, but she initially thought, it's one of those interviews.
No.
Like, no. Let me explain. Special costumes designed by Nino Navarez. We had wardrobe by Tom Dawson. Dialogue coach by Herbert Winters. And I wonder if the dialogue coach was just somebody that was either helping them learn their lines, or was that more for accents?
Maybe both. Yeah, I'm not sure.
We have makeup by Al Fama and Terry Miles. Hairdresser was Lola Skip McNally. And the script supervisor, Julie Pitcairn. I wonder how she even bothered to keep track.
I have no idea.
I wonder how many notes she took, like, okay, this take, they said it this way. This take, they said it this way. This take, they said it this way. Because there were places where they were improving, and she was writing because I was having a hard time keeping up, and I had the script in front of me, to find out what they were changing.
Yeah, which was a crazy amount of change.
We go to the fifth slide, and this is where we get a few more of the technical credits. We have first assistant director, John C. Chule, special effects, Douglas Pettibone, and I think the only effects besides the explosions was, remember, we had the miniature,
right?
And then when you would see the explosions and you would see like the miniature like horse and go flying in the air from the explosions,
right?
That's all part of those little special effects. Not a lot in this movie, but there were some.
There were some, and a lot of gunfire, some things like that. But
the music editor was Gene Marks, and then you had two assistant editors, C. Timothy O'Meara and Stephen Potter. Then there was a second assistant director. He's the guy, a second director is usually working with background extras,
right.
Usually the stuff that the principals aren't in. I'm wondering how much the first assistant and the second worked together on all of that, the montage of the sacking of Rock Ridge. Because there was a lot of like little inserts and little moments here and there that sometimes had principals and sometimes didn't. So I don't know how much Mel Brooks was around or what he was doing.
Yeah, and it seems like that might have been a more all hands on deck kind of thing, because you also had the stunts. You had probably the effects people working with the stunt coordinators, because, you know, they had that like scaffolding fall and the outhouse get pulled off, or the shower house get pulled off the guy. So you had a lot going on with all of those. So I imagine there were a lot.
And we have to remember what we discovered was about 80 of the background extras were already stunt people, so that way they wouldn't have to be taught how to fight.
Right. Yeah,
they already kind of knew how to throw and sell punches. Then you had orchestrations. The Jonathan Tunick and John Morris, they come together for orchestration. We already know John Morris and Mel Brooks got the Academy Award nomination for Best Song. A Crossbow production and filmed at the Burbank Studios in Burbank, California, where we were able to see the outside of that as the riots spilled out of the commissary and out onto Olive and heading toward, I guess, wherever, toward eventually Grumman's Chinese Theater.
That's right. The 16-minute drive to Grumman's.
And guess what? That's it. The next and final thing we get on the screen at 36 seconds into this minute, distributed by Warner Brothers, a Warner Communications company.
And we get 20 seconds of that.
Well, yeah, or we could just turn it off now. But basically it fades to black and we are done with Blazing Saddles.
Amazing. So, and then of course the end of an era.
So let me ask this, because we are coming up on the end of the episode. We're done with the movie. We did this with season 1. We both got to the end and said, I don't want it to end. Mm-hmm. You know, when you start, you're thinking, I can't wait till we get to the end. Right. Now we're at the end. It's like, oh. So I'd like to do what we did last year.
I think that's a good idea. Go eat pizza and drink beer. Oh, that one we were talking about?
No, that's how we start every season.
Oh, that's right.
Although we can still go do that. I don't have a problem with that. I think it'd be nice to go back and maybe pull some folks in, you know, because not everybody's going to have the ability. No, we can't bring everybody back, but we can maybe get a handful of folks to come back and weigh in on their thoughts, and maybe we can do sort of a bonus. How about that?
I think that's a great idea.
Because you know what? I told everybody we were going to make sure that we ended season 2 with a nationwide fireworks display. So I think we've got to do it now. We've got to bring in one more episode where we bring in some voices, we talk about what they said, what we said, blah, blah, blah. And that way, when it wraps, we can go ahead and tell everybody across the country to go ahead and light the fireworks.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. In America, we really appreciate you getting on board with us and celebrating the end of the season.
We appreciate it. You know, growing to be the number one Gene Wilder minute-by-minute movie podcast in the world.
That is quite an honor.
Do you realize what a feat we've accomplished?
We really have.
In basically 16 months, because we officially went live March 26th of 2018.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
So we're even though we're finishing our second season, we've only been around for a year and 4 months.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of our listeners have been with us the whole time. And then
year and 3 months.
Yeah, a year and something. A little over a year. And we've got listeners who've been with us from day one. We've got listeners who just came on board this week. I mean, we had a bunch of people come on board this week for some odd reason. And then moving forward, you know, people are going to find us along the way. So we really appreciate everybody sticking with us through all this, because I know it's a lot of listening to me and Alan. And those closest to us know how taxing that can be. But
and let me do this before we wrap up. I'm going to give the tease. You've got to come back tomorrow. If not for the fact that we've tied it in with a nationwide fireworks display, if not for the voices of other guests that are coming back, I think we're going to do something we didn't do last year. I think, you may argue with me before tomorrow, tomorrow, I think we can drop what we're going to do for season 3.
I think we should. Because I'll tell you, I'm really excited about it.
And I think we can also tomorrow maybe talk about what we're going to do between seasons 2 and season 3.
Absolutely.
Or at least some of the ideas. We may not be able to talk about the exact particular individual movies, but...
Well, everybody's heard BK on our show, who does BK on the air. We're basically going to do what BK does on his show. We're going to tease a whole bunch of stuff up front,
and then
we're not going to get to any of it. Get to maybe one of them.
All right, so as we wrap up this, we wrap up the movie, we're going to have one more episode tomorrow, and then there's still a second bonus. We've been telling you all season long, we're going to release the entire 2-hour interview of Burton Gilliam at the end of the week, so you'll get that, and you can listen to that at your leisure. We've peppered it throughout the season where it was appropriate, but to get the whole thing in context as one big conversation. Well, one more time for today anyway, where can people learn a little bit more about The Wilder Ride?
Well, the best place to learn everything you want to know about us is at thewilderride.com. And from there, you're going to find bios of Alan and I, a bunch of information on all our guests. You'll find all of our past episodes. You'll find some information on our Patreon stuff, which is at patreon.com/thewilderride. We have done Poltergeist and A Christmas Vacation and kind of a modified version where we broke them both down into like 20-minute chunks or a little bit more, and an interview with Beverly D'Angelo. Also, you want to go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/thewilderride. Follow us there, and then there's a button that says join group. Hit that button, answer a couple questions, and you'll join the listeners group where there's all kinds of discussions about Gene Wilder, Mel Brooks, all that crew, and entertainment in general. It's kind of, Alan calls it a safe space from politics and all that, because we just want it to be fun and, no craziness, and, there are plenty of other places for that. So you definitely want to join us there. Also, just on a personal note, I know I missed some days earlier in the season, and I haven't really talked much about that, but my mom is fighting cancer. So same kind of cancer that took Madeline Kahn from us. So I just want to encourage you, if you haven't, if you have some money laying around and can give to cancer research, this is a good time of year for it. There are a couple of the ovarian cancer folks are raising money, breast cancer, and childhood cancer are all making some big pushes. So consider doing that. And one last thing you can do for us, at patreon.com/thewilderride, there's some ways that you can help out our show, because we do have some costs that are associated with it. Those costs go on year round. And if you'd like to help the show out, there's some ways there to give. Even if you have $1 a month laying around that can help, that'd be a huge help to us. Up to, I think the $30 a month range is the top end right now. So we would love to have y'all join us to help out there. That would be a huge help to us.
And come back tomorrow. We will have a bonus finale episode. We will bring some voices back and have a sort of a wrap-up party, if you will, sort of like the cast party at the end of a show. We're done with the run, but we wanted to do one more episode for you folks out there. So swing on back tomorrow, Thursday, for another brand new show on this, The Wilder Ride.
Finally, you don't have to spend any more time with me.
Oh, do you know how hard it is to fake it this whole time? I feel like at the end of like Toy Story, was it Toy Story 2 when Barbie's like, bye-bye, bye-bye. Oh my God, you know how my cheeks hurt from having to pretend like I smile. Oh my God.
Well, people keep saying, I could just tell how good of friends y'all are. I'm glad we had them fooled.
Oh my Lord. Get out of here.
Jerk.
You smell. All right. Beautiful day outside. I'm stuck in here with you.
Exactly.
How
do you think I feel? I'm always stuck in here with me.
Why do we do this to ourselves? That's right.
We're not smart.
Our tens of listeners out there. Still love that joke. All right. Let's go ahead and lock this one down. And your re-recording artist, you had Arthur Piantat. Oh, my God.
That guy?
Yeah. John Morris and Mel Brooks got the Oscar Academy. God bless, I can't speak.